Welcome to the Unlock 360 podcast, where education leaders share how they're turning vision into action, one system, one school, and one student at a time, because strong systems give every learner a better shot at success. Welcome back to Unlock 360, everyone. I am your host, Wendy York Davoud, and joining us today, we have a very special guest that I am super excited to have on the show because I happen to be in his breakout session at TASB's Summer Leadership Institute this June in Fort Worth, Texas. Steve Clugston of Pine Tree ISD, Superintendent Clugston, welcome.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
So good to have you. Will you start by just sharing with those tuning in a little bit about your journey that led you to becoming the superintendent of Pine Tree ISD?
You know, grew up in Crandall, Texas. At the time, it was a small town outside the Dallas area metroplex. You know, the suburbs were growing then, and Crandall was still pretty much country, and it wasn't growing real fast. And went back and started teaching and coaching there. Had my little sister in class and taught down the hall from my older sister and across the hall from my brother-in-law.
Okay.
My principal, who was my principal when I was in school, was still there. And so taught and coached there, and then moved out to East Texas to my wife's hometown and taught there, finished my master's, and went from the classroom to being the principal at James Bowie High School.
Okay.
Northeast Texas. Yeah, we had a school holiday on October 1st, first day of squirrel season. So it was a little, it was a big world, but it was a good place. Anyway, principal in a few places, and then moved into an assistant super role down in around the Houston area, and then got my first superintendent job in Riesel, Texas, outside of Waco, and a little small school of about 500 kids. And I was there 6.5 years, and then moved up to a school of about 1,200 in North Central Texas, and I was there for about a little over 6 years, and then Pine Tree job came open, and it's a very different Pine Tree than what it used to be.
Okay.
And I'd say I think the school kind of struggled to adapt to that because there's different needs. And, I joked with the board when I interviewed. I said, I put in for a job here, 20 years ago. And I said, you guys didn't even interview me. And they were like, oh, we're sorry. And I'm like, don't be sorry you didn't need me then. I think when I came in at this time, a little over 7 years ago, I think I was exactly what they needed.
Okay. I'm curious because I too, at one point, chose to leave the classroom, and I took a different path. I went into literacy coaching and then instructional coaching. But, frequently my colleagues would say, like, why would you want to do that? Because as teachers, we go in to teach kids, right? And so I'm just curious, what was your why for wanting to step away from the actual classroom setting and begin to serve in a leadership position?
I think I got real lucky. I went to my old high school, and there was a new superintendent had come in, Mr. Brandenburg had come in while I was in college. And Crandall was a good place when I was there, but, as a student, and then when I came back, it was even better. And so I went to work there, and, Mr. Brandenburg was everywhere. You saw him all the time. I mean, it was, he'd come out in field house and, talk a little football with us, and you might see him down in the cafeteria, with kids. And anyway, to me, it was a very supportive place, and I think it got me off to a great start. Of course, I knew people there, and I don't know, I just assumed every place was like that. And, when I moved down to East Texas, I quickly realized that, no, that's not the norm. It felt like family in Crandall, and it didn't feel like family everywhere. And so, my whole goal was, well, how do we change it? I wanted to do it like Mr. Brandenburg did. I mean, my whole goal was to build family, to make it a place that people feel like they're truly a part of. And so, you realized after you get principal, you could do it at a campus level, but you still didn't have enough say to make it as a district level. And so my goal was to move up there. And then, I'd say my first, superintendent job, I'm following a guy who'd been there, 20 something years in a small town. And, I think I got lucky, and I had some good teachers that, I was probably 36 years old, just a kid really. And they took me under their wing, and, I think we were able to build kind of regain some energy and build the special that was in that place. And, but you leave and things change. And so, then the next one was to go to see, to make sure what you build outlives you. And I'd say that's where I'm at.
Right.
I put a lot of time and effort in this place, I worked over.
You want to leave a legacy.
Yeah. It's not so much the legacy, it's just leave a
Mhm.
culture that's good for teachers, that good teachers want to work in, and that helps kids become successful adults. That's really,
No, knowing that what you did lasted and
yeah.
and
I
it
mean,
stuck.
we put all this time and energy into it. The
Yeah.
last thing I want to do is see it fail. Yeah.
Right.
And if I'm the only one
Right.
making it happen, then it does fail. So it's about teaching people, to do the things you do, or how to find people that can do, my part. Because one of these days when I'm done, then somebody's got to do what I do. And
Right.
and so our rule here, if you want to retire, you have to train your replacement.
Good.
And
That's
and you have
great.
to train them up to be able to do, you got to figure out they're not necessarily going to be able to do exactly what I do. So their job, Jonathan, you met him at at our session.
Yes.
He's my deputy soup, and he's my replacement. There's some things that Jonathan's a whole lot better than me at, and there's other things he's not as good as me. And so Jonathan's job is to make sure he replaces, as he moves up, he's got to replace, you know, his position with somebody that's good at probably the things I'm good at, and when we create teams, you know,
Mhm.
nobody's the whole
Yeah.
package. We all want to be the whole package. We're just not.
That's very true. Can you take us through, like, you know, um, one of the things you mentioned about it just being the right time for you and, to come to Pine Tree and serve as the superintendent, makes me curious about what it was like then and, where you are now.
It was pretty broken. Had a big discipline problem. A lot of disrespect going on. Uh, and they're burying teachers in paperwork, and everybody. We love to get really waist deep in curriculum, and we act like curriculum is the most important thing, and it's not that what we teach isn't important, but it's probably not in the top three. I'm sorry, maybe not in the top five. Number one, you know, the culture we create is number one. The structure that's created out of that, the relationships that come with that, the work ethic that it develops, and the family atmospheres that makes a place where people, you know, want to serve each other and help each other. Those are the most important things, because if you think about any organization you're in, the employees that can do those things are the ones that are successful. And,
Mhm.
so gosh, they had 25% of the staff was first year when I got here. Yeah, how do
Okay.
you serve that? How do you train 25% of your staff being first year? Uh, like I say, had a big discipline issue. Um, Turnover rate was over 30%, and scores were bad. And I mean, it was just, and like I say, it was broken. Central office
Do you
and the
think
campuses were, I guess wasn't even a love hate relationship. It was probably more of a hate relationship. And,
Oh,
and it's
wow,
not that
okay.
the people in central office, you know, weren't trying. They just, it's kind of like you come up to an injured person and his legs cut off, and you start, doctoring bandages on his, scrapes and bruises on his face. He's probably more concerned about the leg. It's almost like we were treating a symptom, but it wasn't the most important.
Mhm.
I was kind of the, I don't know. I think a little bit when I walked in the door to a lot of our central office, it probably felt a little bit like the Antichrist had got to town a little bit. Was so polar opposite of what they were used to. I spend 90% of my time on campuses, and our central office, all of my central office leaders, they do duty every morning on the campus because we have to know who we're serving, you know. And I remember I walked in, and there's about 8 or 10 of them, and they're working on it in the staff development room on their computers, and it's about noon, I guess. And I said, "What are y'all doing?" And I don't remember, they named something they were working on, and not that it wasn't important, but it wasn't a top priority. And I said, "Well, why don't we put that away and let's go do lunch duty?" You know, because that's where we need help today. Right now, that's the biggest priority. Let's go do that. and so that was a big change for them.
If I could just say, I'm sorry to interrupt, but if I could just say, I love that you all do, you know, duty at your campuses to serve and to build
Well,
relationships. That's
well, it's
wonderful.
like my CFO, she does duty every morning at the primary. And at Christmas, the little primary kids that she opens the door for, they'll get out of the car and she gets 2 or 3 gifts every year at Christmas. I'm almost jealous. I'm like, "Gosh, but it's like she's a
That's so
part of that
sweet.
campus. My HR director was nominated by the staff of the junior high as the employee of the month at the junior high. You know
I love
I mean, we
that.
got 700 employees, but that's central office is supposed to serve the campuses where they can do their job. You know, we tell our people, your job is to make our kids achieve more than they believe they can achieve. And that's a daunting task. Our job is to get the obstacles out of the way so you can do your job. You know, problem I have with most superintendents, and I've been the superintendent for 20 years, and I tell a lot of them, I said, your job isn't to sit in your office and think up crap for everybody else to do. Your job is to go out there and get the crap out of their way so they can do the job you hired them to do.
You know, you're take I'm taking me off you're taking me off script or I'm taking me off script. There's not really a script here, but here we go. So I'm thinking that what you described sounds uh like, district as service center. And it also sounds a bit decentralized in that SACs may have more autonomy. But I don't know. I'm curious about that. You're very centralized, decentralized, or somewhere in the
No,
middle?
I'd say teachers decide what they need. My job is go get it. The non-negotiable is you've got to produce. You've got to get kids that can achieve. That's your job. You know, my job is to get everything what you have to make that happen. If a kid doesn't want to
Mhm.
act right, we'll deal with that. If a parent doesn't want to treat you right, which is all too common these days, they're going to deal with us. You know, I'm not going to allow that. If there's something you got to have, we'll get it. Your job is, you know, we need you to win. Whether that's winning at getting the right scores, if that is that winning it in an actual sport or in a the band getting the first division, doesn't matter what it is. I mean, your job is to go out and succeed. Our job is to help make that happen. And so we don't, I'm not pushing stuff down. We'll push things down from central office. It's from the ground up. What is it you have to have? I mean, it's kind of like, they had to adopt some new math curriculum, and they didn't adopt the same thing. And everybody's like, oh, I just have them all adopt the same thing. No, may make it easier on central office, but that's not where the service is happening. Service is happening in the classroom, but they all understand, you use that curriculum however you think you need to use it. That's my problem with TEA right now is they're trying to push down and dictate how a teacher teaches their kids. Well, every classroom's a little different, and every classroom's got a different makeup of kids. The person that knows what that
Right.
classroom needs more than anybody is the person sitting in that seat as the teacher. So to sit there and think that somebody from Austin can dictate what that teacher ought to be doing is idiotic. You don't know anything about those kids or the teacher or the makeup of that class. And so to me, you know, you want teachers
Yeah.
to be professionals and you treat them like professionals.
Yeah, that is, I think, one of the biggest challenges that we face in public education today is the system at a larger on a larger scale, and having disconnected, decision makers, dictate or decide how things are supposed to be
I
done,
mean,
and not giving the teachers the professional respect that they
well, and
deserve.
then it's like I tell them teachers, results are non-negotiable. You have to get results. That's your job. You know, you tell me what you need, and I'll get you what you need. I will remove the obstacles, and then you go do what you need to do. I sit down with every teacher we hire after, my principal sending me the last step they have is come sit down with me, and I want to ask them one question about how to teach. That's their job. I sit
Mm,
down, want to know a little bit about them, and I tell them this is what we're about. This is what we believe in. And if you believe like us, I think we're a very special place.
mhm,
And I tell them right there, I said, I'm not selling easy. If you're looking for easy, you're coming to the wrong place. I'm
mhm.
selling special. Special is hard. Special takes a lot of work, a lot of dedication. But if you want to be a part of something special, you're in the right place. And so, and 98% of them say, hand me a contract right now and they'll sign it right. But I get, I'll get one or two, you know, that will decide they're not going to sign up for that because they're probably looking for easier. And there are places that are
Mm,
easier to work. There's places with an easier clientele. Well, just not the place for those
yeah.
people. I'm not, if you're just looking for a check, I'm in the wrong place. If you're looking to change the world, make a difference in the lives of kids, our motto this year we're not done saving the world. And we're not. I think
That's so I just that makes me excited. We're not done saving the world. So, will you tell, our watcher or tell, let's share with the, those watching or listening, where is Pine Tree ISD today when you say, we're not done saving the world? What is your current North Star, so to
You know,
speak?
I you to me, I mean, if you look at from where we were, I mean, our kids, you walk around campus, it's going to be yes sir, no sir, yes ma'am, no ma'am. I think I got a lot of kids that don't come from a lot. You know, um, some of them don't have any very much guidance at all at home, but yet they can come here and be a part of something, be a part of a family, and a family with expectations. And so a kid being disrespectful doesn't happen very often. If it generally happens, it's probably a new kid because they don't understand that that's not how we do business here. I think our kids are happy. Um, kids are pleasers by nature. They want to be
Yes.
loved and they want to please you. And so it's a matter of setting them up to be successful. And if you look at us score wise, if you just go to TPRS and look at the relative performance from 2017 to now, we're heading, we haven't dipped at all. And, I'm my new teachers every year, we're about 3 or 4% brand new teachers
From
from 25.
25%.
Yeah. Our turnover rate's probably, I don't know, 12%, and so it's, I think, I look you know, at the people we have. I mean, we've got really good people. And, when people come to us, we expect them, they should be better with us. It's kind of like kids. When kids come here, we expect them to be better than where they were. If we got the right culture, that's what happens because everybody's trying to pull the wagon in the same direction and be
Mhm.
successful. And everybody wants to, not let each other down. We work together. We run what I call the Jerry Clugston rule. And, my parents didn't have a lot, but I'd say I hit the lottery as far as is just having, great parents. And an older
Yeah.
sister and a younger sister, and they're all in our house was, when you say family, then what is family about? Well, family's always supposed to have each other's back. And it doesn't mean that we don't make each other mad occasionally, But in my house, if I made my sisters mad, I had to go apologize and I had to be sincere. And they had to forgive me. They didn't get to hold grudges because functional families don't. We run our district the same way. You don't get to hold grudges here. You know, you don't get to not help. That's not what family does. We run it like family. And if you can't do that, and I've had those conversations with people, well, you need to go apologize because what you did was wrong. And they're like, well, I don't think I can do that. Well, turn your keys in, go somewhere else because you can't work here. That's a non negotiable. We're not going to be dysfunctional. I refuse to allow that. If you want to be a part of this family, you're going to conduct yourself as family. And our people do a great job with that. And sometimes even, I've got people that go home to dysfunction, but they understand that I get to leave that at the curve and come here and not have to live in that.
Mhm. Yeah, and so it sounds like you truly believe, you know in your core, in your heart, that the culture, the climate has been the driving force behind the improved results in teacher retention, less frustrated teachers.
Everybody
Yeah.
wants to act like education is complicated. It's not. It's a very simple thing. How do you improve student performance? How do you improve everything about a school? You make it a place that good people want to work. That's all you got to do. How do you improve student performance? Put a better teacher in the classroom. Okay, make that teacher a better teacher. That's all you have to do. It's not complicated. It's not rocket science. It's very simple. So why is a better teacher? Why is the teacher going to get better? Or why is a better teacher going to want to be in that classroom? Well, you got to make it a place they want to be. So
Yeah.
number one, it's support for them. It's the autonomy they want to do the job that they've trained to do. I mean, that's where their passion lies. We make it a place good people want to work. We make it a place that kids want to be, and we make it a place that that your good parents want to send their kids. That's how you. I mean, I don't have to go out there and be in the middle of math adoption and everything else. No, my job is to make sure that the culture we create that people want to work in is maintained. That's my job.
Yeah, and I admire that and I appreciate that level of respect that you have in that's true servant leader that you're expressing in your practices and your beliefs. I am curious. How does Pine Tree ISD, not necessarily you per se, but um, how do you all have some tier one best practices that all kids can experience in ELA and math? How do you go about doing that while giving teachers some autonomy?
Well, like I say, everybody's accountable for results. So if you're not getting the results, then the question comes in: what are you going to do different? We all think that we're going to teach teachers how to teach from central office. Who's going to teach teachers how to teach other teachers? Their
Yeah,
team's going to teach them how to teach.
I want to hear about
You
this.
know,
Tell us
and
about it. What
so
do you all
that's
do?
you know my thing is if you're serving on a on a reading team or a math team or anything else, and you're not getting it done, you know, then we're going to put here's the person here's people you can talk to. You bet what are you going to do different? What's a non-negotiable is you don't get to keep doing the same thing when you're not getting the results. What are you going to do different? I'm not going to go in there and dictate what you did because I can go in there and dictate and I can make you a little better, but you're not going to embrace it. You're going to do it with the bare minimum effort because it's not what you want to do. And so you're going to get, minor improvements there. My job is to turn you into a rock star. In order
Mm-hmm.
for you to be a rock star, I've got to let you struggle a little bit. I just got to I don't give you the choice to not change. I will give you the freedom to change. And I will put people in front of you that can help you change. The only thing that gets you run off is if you're refusing to change, if you're refusing not to grow. Growth is a non-negotiable. You know, so we get teachers that struggle. Well, you know,
Okay.
that's okay. They're going to have to struggle a little bit in order to get good. I mean, that's what part of it. When we dictate everything, it's a real good way to make a subpar teacher, say acceptable. But it's also a good way to take a rock star teacher and make them acceptable.
Yeah, and I am remembering that as part of your breakout session presentation alongside Jonathan. Um, Tell us a little bit more about that, about the rock star.
Well, we've got our rock star paradigm, and it's basically what we follow, what we want um, our our staff to be able to do. I mean, to be a rock star. It's 5 questions, so that and we get in whenever we have our you know convocation every time. We'll have it 3 times a year. At the beginning of each semester and at the end of the year, but we're all the time looking for our rock stars, and what it is that our rock stars, bring to the table. And, it's not anything that's real complicated, I mean, it's a simple 5 questions that we're asking, and it's, you know, one of the questions is, do you win? Because, and this is a big one for me in education. I think the thing we're best at in Texas when it comes to education is, and probably most people would agree, is in Texas overall, we're probably best at football. Why? Well, because the football coaches never listen to the coach that's 1-9. You know,
Right.
we don't put the coach that's 1-9 on the stage at coaching school to tell everybody how to coach. But yet, on the academic side, we will put people from TEA or service centers or anywhere. We hire the people that are 1-9 all the time and put them up there like they're the one to listen to. And that's our problem. We don't, or we'll hire somebody that hasn't ever taught and they're supposed to be telling us what to do. And I'm like, no, we need the people that win. So your rock stars have to win. You're not
Mm-hmm.
winning, you're not the rock star. Sorry. Well, the rock star's going to win. And so that's a big one. The rock star also, is all in. They're committed and they make the culture better. You get people that can be really good, but they're a detriment to your culture.
Mm-hmm.
Can't be a rock star and be a detriment to the culture. That doesn't happen. And so, we go through, we'll do it, our principals will do a T-test evaluation, but they also go through that rock star paradigm with them and they go through those 5 questions about what it takes.
Okay.
Yeah. and where you feel like, look at this and tell me, what do you feel like? Which one of these do you feel like you're not doing? You know, it's like, they're the best at their craft, but that best of their craft has to be recognized by others. Sometimes you get those people that, you know, they believe they're a lot better than anybody else believes they are. You got to
Yeah.
have that hard conversation to say, I realize you think you're really good, but nobody else thinks you're really good. Other people
Right.
don't recognize it, and maybe you're not quite as good as you think you are.
I'm hearing high expectations and opportunities to meet
Oh
them.
yeah. I mean, uh, you look at the background back over here, you see on my board, and that's our sustainability loop, and it's what feeds in to the loop is our culture, and what feeds that culture in order for us to sustain what we've built, and so leadership feeds into that, and that's leadership at all levels, you know, uh, knowing what the battle is, what the real battle is. Everybody thinks the battle is the STAR test, or it's something we can solve with curriculum. No, the battle is destruction of the family unit. That's the battle. Teaching the kids that go home every day and parents are saying, "Oh, you need to pay attention to what you're doing and what the teacher's saying." That's not the trouble. That's not the hard one. The hard kid is the kid that goes home and there's nobody telling them that what we do matters. There's
Mhm.
value in it. So destruction of the family, that's the battle we're fighting. How do we educate those kids? And if you look at, our state, we're 2/3 of our kids are economic disadvantaged, so, how well we educate them, that's the future of our state. So there's our battles. We got to understand that it's about talent acquisition. How do we attract good people? And then also feeding is growth. How do we get better? Because we can't rock star ourselves out of this. We can't hire enough rock stars. There's not enough of them, and a lot of them are going to retire in the next 5 years. So we better have growth. We
Mhm.
better have some replacements. Otherwise, we're going to get worse. We've got to grow rock stars.
There's so many things that you've said that I'm wanting to speak to, um, and I'll forget them all, I'm sure. But one of the things is, random. H Go figure for those, watching or listening. But, I think education is one of the few places where we demote up. Why do we do that?
Well,
You mentioned
so
something that made me think of that, and I've seen it in school districts, across the nation where you you learn after partnering with them for a little while that so and so in this position at the central office was actually not doing well,
well,
and
again, we don't put the people that win, in in charge. You don't put the coaches 1 and 9 in charge if you want to win. I mean, you don't do that.
Right.
And I think in education we've done that. We've just found a place. It's kind of like we find a corner to hide them in. But quite often it's an easier job with technically more responsibility, and then we wonder why we're not getting anything done. And you can't do that. And so
Right.
everybody has to. Do we move people around in a position we think they'll do better at? We do. You know, but you don't ever put somebody in a position that they can't do. And you don't.
Mhm.
Nobody gets to go. There are people who put in the time and do everything they ought to do to move up into a leadership role. And a lot of people say, "Well, I'm going to give them a chance." Well, you have to be honest with yourself. Can they do their job? And I'm a firm believer that it's a lot easier to tell somebody I love and care about, "I'm not moving you up because this is not the fit for you," than it is to have to fire them from that position when you put them in there knowing they can't do the job. I don't know that that's love and honest with people. And you've got to see them for what, we tend to judge everybody on, what their weaknesses are. And I look at what their strengths are. And I try to make sure that everybody works in their strengths. So we put a team together, whether it's a reading team or whether it's a campus admin team. We're looking at what people are good at, and we want to hire for what they're missing.
That's great, and I think that also, I mean, it's part of the whole culture, the climate, the expectations, all of those pieces, but a contributing factor to why you're seeing that growth over time consistently happening is that you're not taking the easy way out, and unfortunately I yeah, there's um too much of that happens, and it gets in the
Well, and
way.
often they don't know because they don't know either,
Right.
you know?
Right.
Um, I know all 700 employees. I spend, like I say, 90% of my time on campus. So when I'm out and about with I know what our people can do and I know what they struggle with. I'm very actively involved in that. And that way, when we sit down and we talk about, who can we move into this position, you know, then we can put a group of campus administrators, several campus administrators and central office people and everybody together and sit around. And it's amazing. Somebody will say, you know what, I think so and so can do that job. And it's amazing how somebody will come up and it'll be somebody that none of us even thought of. But they over here, say on the primary campus or on the middle school campus, are like, yeah, they're really good at that. I'm going, you know what? They really are. Didn't think about that. Our movement of people has come from within quite often. And if we don't have somebody ready at that time, we'll go outside. If I've got somebody that can do the job inside, we're going to move them into that position. And that's what we do most of the time. But, if I've got somebody and we're all the time trying to build people, we're thinking about where could they fit in down the road, but if you have somebody that's not ready, then we're going to go outside, and if it's in the middle of the year, sometimes that's tough. My high school principal is doing a fantastic job. And our high school principal, his mother, who was there before, mother lived out of Houston, fell, got injured, and hospital sent her home. She can't even take care of her, so she's got a broke hip, and so Cleo had to go and go take care of his mom. I didn't have anybody ready, and so my Brian Krause Beeper is what we call him. He's from here, been here his whole life, and he bleeds blue and yellow when you cut him, and he's a great guy, and didn't he was our golf coach. Didn't want to be an assistant principal, but I didn't give him a choice because I knew he could do it. And then I told him, I said, "You're going to be the high school principal." He said, "Well, I'm not ready." I said, "You're exactly right. You're not ready." I said, "But here's the thing: the teachers will follow you because they believe in you, and they will help you, and together they will help you become ready." And so, we just propped him up, and the teachers did a great job. And I'll never forget his first faculty meeting. He's calling in there, and you can tell he's kind of nervous and everything. And one of the teachers who had known him for years said, "Come on, Beef, you got this, bud. You got it." And that campus has taken off, because he's a true servant leader. They know that he loves them and loves kids, and he'll do anything for them. He works tirelessly and wants to do everything he can. So those teachers work really hard for him. Every staff member over there, those kids, he knows the kids. And, when you get that, was he ready at the time? No. But but he's been able to do it because he's not afraid to learn, and everybody's out there helping him. You know, Take a teacher who's been in the biz for 35 years, they kind of know what they need from the administration. If you're smart enough to listen, so often you put some in, I don't want to listen to that. I don't want to listen to the teacher. Well, I got news for you. Says you've been around a lot longer than you have.
How do you, another thing you mentioned that I wanted to ask about was sustainability and leadership. How do y'all in Pine Tree go about developing leaders from classroom teachers, developing their leadership so that they may be ready to step
Well,
into?
we've got our Anchor Academy is, it's all of our new teachers, and we keep them in that for 2 years. And we may keep them in there longer if we feel like they still need to grow some more. But then we have a group of mentor teachers, that go in and we pair them up and we meet, they're supposed to meet, throughout the years. It's generally going to be somebody on their campus or, on their team. And but then we meet about 3 times a year where we bring them in and we talk to our mentors about, hey, here's what your job is. Like the other day, we had a staff development day, so we take about an hour to bring our mentors in, and we're like, okay, here's the thing: we're 9 weeks in, you know, we're kind of in this long stretch before Thanksgiving, and everybody's kind of beat down, and we're going to get this, 3-day weekend. You know, you need to go in and make them feel like, you know, if they can do this, make them believe they can. Let them talk to you about what they're struggling with. Sometimes they may not even know what they're lost. Help them find help they need. If you can't help them, you guide them to where they need to go. But when they come out of here, I need them to believe when they show back up on Tuesday, they can do this. And so we kind of coach them up on what they need to do. And then they go out and they sit down. I mean, Anchor Academy comes in. We just kind of say, hey, you're going to meet with your mentor. You're going to pour out your heart, what you feel like you're doing well, where you feel like you're struggling. And they're here to help grow you. And then we turn them loose. They go wherever they need to go, and they meet as long as they need to meet. We leave that up to them. And then that's how we start developing those teachers, and they start learning who is my trusted source that can help me grow. Nobody gets to have an ego here. You know, leave your ego at the door. We don't have time for it. We all can learn from each other. And,
Yes.
and then we do, we look at anybody that's in a leadership role or maybe has aspirations to be a leader or has influence, has no desire to be a leader, but has influence. All of those groups of people need to be trained on how to be a leader because even if they don't want to be, they're either going to be or they are, or people are going to look to them for leadership. So you've got to teach them how to be leaders. And so we do retreats every year, and we run
Okay.
150 people through retreats every summer. It's a 2-day retreat for them. We do two separate ones. We do a Monday, Tuesday, and then we bring a new group in and we do Wednesday, Thursday. But day one is all about what leadership looks like and everything that goes with that, and you know how to grow as a leader. And then we get done, and then we're going to play a bunch of games, and I cook for everybody, and we're going to cook, and we're all going to eat together and hang out and enjoy each other's you know enjoy the time together. We're going to fellowship, and we're going to talk a little shop. We're going to tell some old stories, and maybe play some more games. And then the next day we come in and it's okay. Here's where we're at as a district, and here's where we're going. Now, how do you help us get there? And we
Yeah.
used that group. We developed core values. And then we developed you know what are what are our catchphrases to go along with that, so everybody understands what that means. And then this year was, what's our non-negotiables? You know, what's our non-negotiables for everybody? Well, no excuses. That's a non-negotiable for us. Nobody gets to be complacent. If you're not growing, you can't stay. No negativity. We'll allow that. That's a non-negotiable, and that's got to be everybody. And there's no quit. We don't get to quit because it gets hard. That's a non-negotiable. We don't disrespect anybody. That's not each other. It's kind of like we can have people that can you can welcome to talk politics with your neighbor, but if you get disrespectful, no, you can't bring that. Don't bring that to the table if you can't do it. That's a non-negotiable. We don't disrespect anybody, and we have to have respect for each other if we're gonna. That's how family works. You can't disrespect family. And so those are non-negotiables. I look at that 150. I can't be everywhere. They're my culture defenders. You know,
Hmm.
because everybody's going to be on their best behavior when I walk in the room. When I'm not. The
Yeah,
worst behavior our people tolerate is where our culture will rest. And
that's
I've
true.
got to have culture defenders, and so we had to build that group. We started that group with about 30 people, and then it was, then it was 50 people, and then it was 75, and then it was 100, and we feel like, 150, that's roughly about 20% of our staff. And we feel like we get 20%, out there defending the culture, then the culture can sustain, you know, and,
Hmm.
but we do that every year with, with our retreat. And, I think those people really get bought in and everything else, and realize, it's not just a learning experience for them, but they also get, they get to participate and give feedback and their
Yeah,
thoughts on how we make this better. We get some great.
yeah. They get a voice. They have a
Exactly.
voice.
And,
Yeah.
and I tell them, I don't want to be a leader. I understand you don't want to be a leader, but you have influence. You're good at what you do, and everybody looks to you.
You already are a leader, whether you know it or not, because you're leading kids all the time.
This is what I need you to help with. I got
Yeah.
one teacher in particular I think about that, she's a great teacher, but she really didn't want to be a leader. And, she would kind of allow some negativity around it, but you could see it drove her crazy. And so we got her involved in her, in retreats and everything. And now she's taken a bigger role, and she's taken that negativity and she's squelched it. And I've watched the people around
Good.
her, some of them who kind of like to, gripe and get wah, 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 and complain, and now they don't. She has grown them. And it's not that she's going to say, no, we're not doing it. She just said, she's been a guide for them. She's allowed her influence to guide, them in the culture and in the team and as a team. And so they've all gotten better, you know. That's a win, you know.
That's a big
It
win.
is because, like I say, our thing is we got a teacher shortage. You can't just write them off. You're a lot better off to grow them. So that's, growth is a huge part of it. Yeah. But
Yeah.
that growth doesn't
If
come
you
from
if
the top down. That growth is, it's a little bit organic, but it
Yeah.
has to happen.
If you, thinking to the future, if you, take a step back and to really look at the forest, through the trees, where would you say is a good next step for Pine Tree in order to, continue to get better as a school district collaboratively together as leaders, for kids?
Well, our whole thing is we believe that kids being involved and is important. So we want to be good at everything. If a kid does that, we want
Okay.
to be good at it. You know, we want to win, and because everybody wants to be a part of a winner, everybody does. And so we're going to ask our kids to go out and put their heart and soul into something and put a lot of effort. Then we need to be good at it. And so that means we've got to support it. We've got to get them what they need. And I go to a whole lot of stuff. Probably 4 nights a week, I'm at a game or a band concert or something because I can't tell kids that it's important to be involved, and I don't give time to go watch them. And so, our teachers do a really good job of that, of doing the same thing. A lot of people go out, but we want to be good at everything because we want our kids to understand that if you do the things we ask you to do, success is going to happen. None of our outcomes, if you look at our 6 outcomes that we value, none of them are academic. Because if you do these 6, then success, whether it be academic, whether it be on the football field, whether it be on the, you know, uh, on the, on the stage, or whether it be, you know, on a band marching contest, success is going to happen. Doesn't matter if it's in a third grade math class. If you can do, if you embrace the 6 outcomes that we're trying to develop in you, and that's what we believe our culture does, because we don't think you can teach these in a class their junior year. We get a life class about how to become successful in life. No, culture teaches you that. So the culture has to embrace these 6 things, and one of them is be dependable. You know, show up on time every day and
Mhm.
do what you say you're going to do. That's a non-negotiable for us. I mean, we make a big deal out of tardies. I said, why do you make such a big deal about being late? I said, because I'm trying to teach you to be dependable. You know, we
Right.
practice these things. Why do you think teachers give you deadlines? That's how you learn how to be dependable. So being dependable. So if they're dependable as an adult, okay. The next one is they gotta have a work ethic. You gotta be willing to work hard, and that's just the way it is,
Yeah.
hard work. So, they gotta be able to get along with others.
Mhm.
They gotta be able to follow the rules. I tell them all the time, right now, you follow Steve Clugston's rules because I'm in charge. You gotta follow my rules. I said, but here's the thing, when you leave me, somebody else gonna be setting the rules. And so you're gonna have to live within those rules. Might be the government, it might be, the local city. If you've got a business, there's gonna be rules. You gotta figure out how to play within those rules. How can I be successful within the rules? So that's just something you got to do. Uh, you know, they've got to be able to solve their own problems.
These are good, these are great. I
Well,
mean,
look,
some people think of them as soft skills, but they're actually essential skills,
exactly.
right?
We look at it as a tool belt. If you don't have them on your belt, you're in trouble. But
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
solve your own problems means we don't take excuses. I was going to interview. Never had somebody want to interview for a administrator's job and calls us like you know, day before, oh, my car is acting up. Can we do this by Zoom? And I'm like, no, if you can't solve that problem to get here, you don't want to be here bad enough. So there's no sense in us doing the interview. I expect my
Okay.
kids to solve that problem. I don't say, well, my car doesn't start. I couldn't get to school. No, get on your bike or something, get here. Call me to come get you, whatever. We solve, so we teach our kids, we don't take excuses, solve the problem, solve it,
That's
and then they don't
good.
get to quit
Yeah.
when it gets hard. So if you look at if a kid can do those 6 things, and I think I covered all 6 of them, but
Sounds like you
if they
did,
can do
yeah.
those
Uh-huh.
6 things, teaching them math is not hard, okay? Teaching them to be if I get a whole team of them on a football field, teaching them how to be a good football team isn't hard. Teach them how to be a good band, teach them how to be, a good reader. None of that stuff's hard if they can do those. Teaching is not the hard part. Teach them to do those things is hard. And as a school, we used not to have to be good at that because those were taught everywhere. Rich or poor, they were taught at home. They were taught.
This is a good
They were taught
point.
at
Uh-huh.
church. They were taught at Little
Right.
League. They were taught at school. They were taught at the neighbor's house. I grew up, and if I went to the Matlock, James Matlock lived across the street. His parents had a lot of money, and if I went over there, same expectations as at my house, and we didn't have a lot. Rowdy Gilbert, and Richard, two of my good buddies, they lived down by the cemetery, and I mean, they were dirt poor, and but the same thing was taught at their house, you know. And if you look at all of us today, you know, Josh Rowdy just, he retired as a 30-something year deputy, for the county sheriff's office. James has got, two or three businesses. He's been super successful. I'd say I've been pretty successful. And so those things that were taught us, were built into us, became who we are, made being successful a whole lot easier. And today, these things are not taught everywhere, and especially among our poor, because it's so many broken families. And as we get more, immigrants and things like that, sometimes they don't understand the value always of that. And so we've got to make sure as a school that we're good at that. We think that curriculum is the most important thing. It's not. It's instilling these things. I mean, half the jobs they're going to have hadn't even been invented. How do you prepare a kid for that with curriculum? You don't. You prepare them to be able to adapt and learn and solve problems no matter what gets thrown their way. So
Mhm.
to me, that's what people don't understand, about and a lot of educators don't. That's really what we have to do.
Yeah, I think that piece you just mentioned, that ability to adapt and, that willingness to learn and grow and change, be flexible, I think is huge for the future.
And we get, it's a stat that they love to throw out there. Well, we look at third grade reading scores and then we can predict
Mhm.
future prisoners. Well, I got news for you. They're not going to prison because they can't read. Okay. That's not, there may be a correlation, but it doesn't mean causation. They're going to prison for the same reason they can't read. Why didn't they learn how to read? Because they didn't value what you were doing. They didn't put any effort into it. Nobody was saying it's important to do, and, so they didn't learn how to read because nobody's sitting there, "Oh, yeah, you need." And so that's the same reason they're going to prison, because they're like, "Oh, I don't have to listen to people that know, and none of this matters, and I can do whatever I wanna do." That's the reason you go to prison. That's the same reason they can't read. So you're, saying, "Well, we teach them how to read." Well, what you have to do is teach them to value what's going on. We're in the only business where the customer wants to be ripped off.
That's a really interesting perspective. I appreciate you sharing that.
Yeah. So what we have to do is teach our kids to value it. If you're teaching my kid, she's an easy sell. We're selling a product they don't know that they even need, but yet it's essential. They don't even know they need it, but it's an essential product for them. They're not going to know they need it until they're 25 years old. And they're going to
Yeah.
say, "Ooh, I don't have it." You know. And so, for my kid, you know, she does, "Well, I don't wanna learn that." And I go, "No, you need to shut up and listen to the teacher. She knows what she's talking about. This is gonna be important today." So she's an easier sell because there's somebody giving street cred to the teacher when, yeah, she knows what she's talking about, you know? And, but for the kid that doesn't have that, that means the relationship that we have, them being, involved, we need them in that culture so that they learn, I mean, to value what it is. We become that trusted source that, yeah, I do need to know how to do that one because that's going to help me. And what? It's like the reading deal. We get, a couple 100,000 people come across the southern border every year that can't read a lick in Spanish, but yet they can come over and hold a job and make a living. Well, how come? Because they have those other things we've talked about.
Mhm.
So don't tell me reading makes you successful. No, reading is a part that makes you a chance to get even more successful, but it's not the essential thing that makes everything possible. Matter of fact, they can come over and learn the language and everything else because they can do those six things. So we have to
Mhm.
understand, you know, where our kids are and what we need to instill in them to allow them to adapt to whatever's coming. And like I say, we get so caught up sometimes in curriculum that we think curriculum's the answer. No, curriculum is something we add to.
It's a tool to
Yeah,
yeah.
it's something we add to it to give you a chance to be even more successful, to broaden the opportunities that lie. Our job, I look at, everybody complains about the window of opportunity, and it's not the same for everybody. And I'm like, no, it's never going to be. you're 7 foot tall and athletic, that window's wide open. You can afford some mistakes, and somebody's still going to give you a chance. If your parents are well connected, same thing. You know, sorry. I mean, just look at some politicians' kids. They can be a complete screw, but they
Yeah.
still get an opportunity. But for most of
Yeah.
us, that window of opportunity is going to be open at different levels. And we really can't afford mistakes. So our job is to teach our kids, here's the things you have to be able to do. And we don't worry about how wide open the window is. We want to teach every kid to get through it. And then when you get through it, you're going to get an opportunity. And then you take that opportunity and turn it into a better one. And the more you learn from us, the more of the curriculum you understand, the more opportunities are going to be in front of you, and allows you to move up faster, allows you to move up higher. But understand, without these things, you're not going to be successful at all. You're going to jump from job to job or whatever it is, or be in that same cycle that you don't want to be in. I had a girl when I got here, and she was foul. So I'd be on high school campus, and I'd tell her, I'd say, "Hey, how you doing?" And she'd be like, want to roll her eyes. I said, "No, ma'am, it's not how it works. Don't talk to you. You have to talk to me." So I'd go look her up every day just to kind of push her buttons and make her talk. And so it kind of becomes this joke, and she's like, "All right, Miss Clugston, what do you want to talk about today?" And I'd be like, "Hey, tell me about your weekend." "Oh, no, let me tell you about mine." So we start building this relationship, and and then some of the coaches start giving her, teasing her a little bit and giving her, and she, it kind of becomes this fun thing. Well, next thing you know, she gets involved. She's helping with the trainers, and she starts doing so much better, and
First to come around.
yeah, and
Yeah.
I mean, and anyway, one day she's coming on, and some other girl bumps to her, and she's real ugly to her, and I was like, "What are you doing, girl?" I said, "You can't be ugly like that." She goes, "Miss Cluxon, I can't be nice." I said, "You got to be nice." She goes, "Well, you can't be nice in my neighborhood." And I looked at her and I said, I said, "I don't disagree with you." I said, "Let me ask you a question. You want to live in that neighborhood the rest of your life?" And she looked at me. She says, "No, I do not." I said, "Well, let me tell you, that not being nice will not make you successful. You will not be in the world, the successful world outside of your neighborhood." I said, "So you're going to have to learn how to cut it on and cut it off. Otherwise, you can't be in that world." You know, and I said, "You understand what I'm saying?" And she goes, "Yeah, I think I do." And by the time she's graduated, you know, she had a job at the grocery store and had a big old smile, and everybody loved to go to her line. I mean, she's one of the best employees there, and went on to college, but she was a 180-degree turnaround. And, and that came from, people pouring into her and not giving her a choice, but, almost force that relationship to, you know, and to teach her to learn to value the things that make you successful. The beautiful thing about America, there's two worlds. There's an unsuccessful world and the successful world. And the beautiful thing about America is anybody can be in the successful world. Anybody. The tragic side of America is anybody can be in the unsuccessful world. So, what are the tools it takes to be in this world? We believe those 6 things that that will
Amen.
get you in that world. Now, how high you get to go in that world depends a whole lot on, that's where the curriculum comes in and everything else that we pour into you. The work ethic and how far you want to take that, and how
Right.
much you want to learn. That opens the door, just becomes wider. So that's your choice. But our job is to make sure we give you the tools that you get to be in this world.
Hmm. I love that. And really just so excited. Glad you were here. It's been great talking to you to hear your heart, your passion, learn about the values in Pine Tree ISD. Steve, where can someone go, say they are looking for a position? And while you may not have a lot of turnover these days, where could they go to learn more
If
about?
you want to learn about Pine Tree, you know, call me on my cell phone, 903-806-0840, and we'll set up time for you to come see me, and we'll go walk the campus. We'll go out, among the people, and I'll show you what it's about, because that's going to tell the story better than I can. Get out there and see what it looks like. Feel when you walk in the door on our campus, it feels different, and it's supposed to.
That's
And so
incredible.
you want to learn about us. That's where you learn it. You know,
That's
go out.
incredible. Thank you so much. Yeah. All right. So you got to take him up on that. Um, Everyone, thank you so much for tuning in today. It has just been a pleasure, and we will see you soon.
Thanks very much.
Thank you for listening to the Unlock 360 podcast. Follow us on LinkedIn and YouTube, and visit leadteachlearn360.com to learn more about us, because every school deserves systems that work and leaders who can make them thrive.